Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 years. Before we finish off the R last names, I'd like to make a few clarifications. First of all, I may have misled some people on the Vito Rodriguez and Psycho Rodriguez case in regards to Big D Garcia. Big D walked away from that life, basically hung up his gloves, threw in the towel. I can't recall all the details in that, but I think Vito took the entire rap for killing his brother. Big D was present, however, and it bothered him quite a bit. I'm sure there was other incidents also that were on his mind. And so he turned to the Lord and joined Victory Outreach. But again, he never debriefed. In fact, in his book that he signed for me when I was reading it, I could tell he was very careful about not mentioning any details about La M. Basically, all he said was he was an original Mexican Mafia member back in the early days. And mostly it's a testimonial of his conversion to Christianity. Also, Psycho Leo was originally from San Jose, as shown on the Mexican Mafia roll call that's on each of my shows. However, I seem to recall Moco saying that he would be spotted around Evergreen sometimes, which is a barrio in East LA. That part of the video got cut off for some reason. If you go back to that video, it kind of starts abruptly, and that's the reason why. And also, in regards to Gustavo Rivera, there were two Gustavo Riveras, and I showed a picture of a Gustavo Rivera who became a dropout. He was active in the MA in the 1970s, and I believe was involved in the homicide of a Walter Hallman at the San Diego County Jail in 1976. I believe Art Conejo Blajos, who also went to Victory Outreach, attempted to murder him in 1979 in LA County Jail. And so that different Gus dropped out back in the late 70s. I understand that he is currently dying of terminal cancer, so let's pray for him. The Gus Rivera that I mostly covered through the episode was the correct Gus that is associated with the AFO, but he is much younger than the other Gus. So I hope that straightens out those errors in that last video. So let's get into it. There was Ben, aka Benito Romero from Casablanca. He had a B number, 8738. Was born in 1947. I understand he dropped out in the mid-1970s. There was a Carlos Caco Romero from State Street. He was active in the 1970s and paroled in 76 and did a lot of big dope deals with Joe Morgan. He was Chief Sandoval Steel, and I'm not sure what happened to him after the 1970s. There was a David Downer Romero. He had an H number, 56803. But I understand later on became a peseta, and I show is no longer in custody, at least under that H number. There was an Edward Eddie Boy, a.k.a. Monster Romero from Orange County. He had a B number, 93677. He was born in 1945. He was MA in the early 1980s, and I show is still validated as of 2004, but I believe is deceased. There was a Joseph C. Romero. He might have been the brother of Caco. He had an A number, 14672, and was born in 1928. He was also active in the MA in the 1970s, paroled in 1972, went back on, I believe, on a violation, and paroled in 76, and was also big into dope, as most of these guys are. There was a Robert Bobby Romero from Norwalk. He had BOP number 32995-112. Now, this guy was a big-time dope dealer and had lots of friends in the BOP, as seen here. Bobby also ran around with Fox Tapia, who I'll be talking about here soon under the T episodes. And I show Bobby was released from the BOP in 2018, and I believe is laying low. There's Arthur Art Romo from Santa Ana. I talked about him a little bit when I talked about San Ojeda. Art was never as big as Sana, but had a lot of pull and was involved in the Orange County peace treaties between the different warring gangs. Once again, he states he was never MA, but I believe CDC validated him on T number 9019 when he was at Pelican Bay, and I show paroled in April of 2012. There was Ezekiel Zeke Romo from Blythe Street. This guy was covered quite a bit in the LA Times recently, if you want to look that article up. But he hit CDC in 1996, and I understand eventually got sponsored into the MA by Cartoon Losa, Frank Playboy Fernandez, and Raul Smooth Garcia from Pacas. When he paroled in 2015, he decided that he was going to take over the Blythe Street gang. At that time, the Alba brothers were still riding the sails on the winds of yesterday, professing their MA status, but it sounds like they're mostly dope fiends, and he ordered multiple murders in the San Fernando Valley, often using members of his own gang to do missions in Panorama City. Romo even green-lighted guys if they put on Blythe Street tattoos without authorization, and taxed all drug dealers in his area. He was an intimidating figure, almost 6 feet tall, and often wore dark sunglasses and would expose his butterfly tattoo on his neck. As I've said in previous episodes, the butterfly, or la mariposa, is often used as a symbol of la M. Romo would often arrange deals with paisas, Mexican nationals, and then steal their dope. After he was busted, he was sent off to Centinela State Prison, and he continued to direct orders to younger gang members, including taking out Isidro Topo Alba, one of the Alba brothers. I believe Ezekiel Romo is presently out to court on multiple cases. There was Cecil D. Rosales. I'm not sure what barrio he was from, but he had a B number, 41991. He was M in the 1970s, got released, and then came back on an E number as an Edward, 2612. And I lost track of him after 2004. Many of you are aware of Ernest Ronald Roybal, a.k.a. Kilroy, a.k.a. Suge. He was a longtime MM member out of White Fence and was known as being a killer. He was a very large and intimidating figure who was involved in the MA since the 1960s. He was involved in multiple hits for the MA inside and outside of prison, including that of Apache Alvarez, which was conducted with Alfie Sosa. Kilroy had a personal beef with Joe Morgan. I recall Captain Knowles at Folsom saying that Joe was very upset with Kilroy for not hitting a BGF member that was on the lista. Allegedly, Kilroy said, "Well, when you were at Folsom, why didn't you hit him?" This did not go over well with Joe. But even though he was not as powerful as Joe, Kilroy had a lot of followers. Kilroy also pushed for a Mexican-only rule for carnales. At one time, there were multiple races, everything except black being made, and it was Kilroy who pushed for a Chicano-only rule. This also may have been seen by Joe Morgan as an affront to his nationality, since he was Slavic. It was no secret, but Joe had no love for the blacks and sanctioned many hits on the BGF. After the Father's Day Massacre, however, Kilroy, along with Nico Velasquez and Mo Farrell, agreed to a peace treaty with the BGF in 1986. This did not go over well with Joe either. Kilroy had been a fixture at Folsom Prison for many years, organizing boxing matches and organizing many drug deals out in the yard. He was sent to Tehachapi Shoe in 1987, whereby he was later hit by Sleepy Huerta in December of 1989. He was later shipped up to Pelican Bay, and I recall that on the bus, he was really worried that they would hit him again. I know that he was arrested by Rialto PD in 1996, as seen in this picture here, but eventually left his life of crime to the amazement of many people and joined Victory Outreach. He died in January of 2021 as being an MA legend. I will mention Michael Spider Roybal, who claimed Florencia 13 and had ties to Denver, Colorado. He was the stepbrother of Champ Reynoso. I don't know that he was ever accepted as a carnal, but he had a lot of juice in the Colorado system, according to my good friend Steve Lucero, who was an investigative lieutenant for many years with Colorado DOC. There was Albert Smokey Ruiz from Redlands. He had an E number, 24881. I understand was MA in the mid-1990s, but I lost track of him after 2012. There was a Frankie Ruiz from San Bernardino. He had an A number, 70338. He was MA in the early 1970s and was president of Chino, California Institution for Men when the Aranda brothers were beat and stabbed, as I mentioned in multiple previous episodes. There must have been a whole bunch of guys on the Aranda brothers, which was one of many incidents that led to the stabbing and killing of Cheyenne Cadena not long after. There was George Mums, a.k.a. Silent Ruiz, from San Diego Logan Heights. He had a B number, 54622. I showed he was released on that one and came back with another B number, 82089. George was born in 1942 and joined the MA in the 1970s. He also happened to be the uncle of MA member Angel Stump Valencia, who was part of that hit on Mo Farrell that I talked about several times when he was assisted by Danny Boy Pena at Folsom Prison. Understand that George was hit at San Quentin in 1985 for being part of the Bevito Alvarez car. He also had a well-known relationship with Rachel Ortiz from Barrio Station in San Diego. He was housed at Pelican Bay for many years and Solano in 2016 when they started letting guys out of the chute. He was pretty low-key, as his moniker Mums and Silent shows, and understand died of complications due to COVID in February 2021. There was Gilbert Chaparro Ruiz from Fort Mata. He was MA in the 1970s and housed several times at the LA County Jail as well as the San Diego County Jail. But I don't have a lot of documentation on him. There was Gilbert Little Mo Ruiz from White Fence. He had an H number, 70738. I believe he made his bones when he hit Vesey Sagado in 1992 with Boxer Enriquez, who later became his cellie. Vesey was from 18th Street and aligned with his fellow 18th Street member, Papa Martinez. Vesey had been pushing a new movement called the Southside Government, whereby he and others would collect taxes from Sureño street gangs. Vesey's idea collided with the Emmy Edict that was also just coming out around the same time. A lot of people have stated that Vesey was made a carnal, and indeed, he was prospected into La M, but I understand blew it with his aggressive ideas and movidas. I will get more into Vesey's contested Emmy status when I get to the V last names, as in Victor. Understand that Mo was stabbed by Lalo Martinez in 1997 and quickly became in trouble with the Carnales. He was housed at Corcoran in 2016, I believe by that time on disregard status, but I show was no longer in custody. There was a Richard, a.k.a. Richie, a.k.a. Dogface, a.k.a. Tupac Amaru from Bakers. He had an A number, 56597, and was the homeboy of Cheyenne Cadena. In fact, they were arrested in the very same murder case in 1959. Richie Ruiz first did time when he's 15 years old. Ruiz was first sent to the CYA in April of 1956 on a theft of a motor vehicle. He was housed at the Preston Facility for Boys, located in Ione, California, when he was in the California Youth Authority. And I understand that is where he first met Guido Buff Flores. He paroled in February of 1957, but then returned on a parole violation in February of 1958. He then paroled in February of 1959, but approximately 8 months later, on Halloween of 1959, Richie, Cheyenne Cadena, and some other homeboys attended a Halloween party when, right after midnight, their clica bumped heads with a rival group, and an individual named Avelino Aguilar was killed. According to the press release, he was stabbed 25 times. Later on, Shy admitted to stabbing Aguilar, and Richie pled down to using brass knuckles. Cheyenne Cadena arrived in CDC in December of 1959, and Richard Ruiz was also sent to prison at that time. But he did not arrive at DVI until the spring of 1959, whereby he met a little over a dozen other MM members and was brought into La Clica. Richie was told by Guido Buff and the others that they planned to control all the rackets for the Chicanos. Sergeant Bill Hankins, in his book Alpha Guard, talks about how Richie was one of the first guys he identified as being in La M, and he confronted him, told him that he knew about La M, and Rich just said that, yeah, there could be, but told Hankins that administration would never believe him anyways. If I understand correctly, Hankins took this as a win, and since all the young suspects in La M, including Richie, were locked down, he gave them showers when they were housed in San Quentin's East Block. It sounds to me like even though he didn't flat out snitch, he might have dry snitched. Richie was involved in the 187 of Tony Chacon from Maravilla. This was one of the first incidents that caused problems between many of the Maravillas and La M. They hit Antonio Tony Chacon after he was put in the adjustment center for having a shank. Tony had accumulated some debt to La M, so he was killed in 1963 before returning from the adjustment center exercise yard on his way to his cell located on the second tier. Rich Ruiz later on ended up sponsoring Daniel Spider Arriaga, which is kind of an irony because many years later, Spider stabbed him either at the domino table or at a baseball game. I've heard two stories after Rich Ruiz asked him to watch his back. I understand that the corrections officers fired 3 shots during the hit. Richie was a boxing champion and allegedly took the knife away and then beat Spider, allegedly telling the other emeros, "You sent a boy to do a man's job." Supposedly, this hit was put on him by Bevito Alvarez over a disagreement on a dope deal, and the M backed Bevito's play. Also, Mike Acheson's sister was a junkie and claimed that Richie had raped her during a dope run from San Francisco down to Baker's. Eventually, Richie dropped out and debriefed to the gang task force and Bill Hankins. He told Hankins everything he knew about La M from the early days in the late 50s up until 1980. He also mentioned several unsolved murders that the MA had committed. Understand that Richie later died from liver failure, probably from drug and alcohol abuse, like a lot of these guys. There was Robert, a.k.a. Chino, a.k.a. Peanut Butter Ruiz, from El Hoyo Mara. He had an A number, 82318, and was born in 1943. He was inducted in the MA in the 1960s and did time at various joints, including Folsom Prison, whereby he killed an NF associate named Leroy Quintana in July of 1974 at Folsom. He was a major fixture at Pelican Bay and Tehachapi in the SHU program. Ruiz was said to have been involved in multiple 187s and hits, allegedly including the hit he did with Cheyenne Cadena on NF shot caller Lips Valdez in the early 70s. Robert Ruiz was released in 2014 from CDC and fled parole and went down to Tijuana, where he was very involved in drug trafficking and organizing sureños, camaradas, and Mexican Mafia members down in Baja. So the story goes, authorities had tapped an illegal cell phone belonging to Danny Boy Pina from Hazard when Danny Boy got a call from a man who identified himself as Jerry and said he was with Pina's hermano, Peanut Butter, down in Tijuas. Within a couple weeks, we're going to be dealing with again some material, he mumbled. Okay, Danny Boy said, what are the prices? And Jerry interrupted, okay, because everything is cheaper if you buy it over here, you know. And Danny Boy responded, no, I understand that. What are the prices on this end? Jerry asked for clarification. Okay, you're talking about heroin? Pena responded, I'm talking about whatever, white, black, etc. Jerry told him that a pound of methamphetamine could be bought in Tijuana for just over $1,000, plus $800 to cross it, and it's sold in California for over $2,000. A kilo of black tar heroin, valued at $26,000 in California, costs half of that in Mexico, he added. Danny Boy said, okay, we want a sample on this end, and told him that if and the other locked up Meadows liked it, they would make multiple orders and payment via the underground prison market. He died in June of 2016 with full honors as being another legend in La M. I show a Robert Smiley Ruiz, who's from 18th Street. I believe he lived out in Fontana for a while, but I think he also had some ties in Seattle. So there would be another one. Hidden F numbers in Frank, 54483. Was born in 1967. I show he was housed at Tehachapi in 2006, and I'm not sure what happened to him. There was Ruben Ruiz from Baker's. He had a C number, 62457. And I understand was MA at DVI in 1980, but eventually dropped out and was housed at SATF Corcoran in 2012. But I show is no longer in custody. There was Hector Ruiz Yanez from Arta. He had a C number, 82771. I understand he hit CDC in 1984 and was later validated as MA. He was housed at Corcoran in 2016 and Ironwood State Prison 2021 and currently resides at Old Folsom. When I did the Sana Ojeda piece under the O episode, I talked about a Tyrone, a.k.a. Thumper Rye from Orange County. He was considered to be one of Sana's main ambassadors during the war that Sana had against Armando Moreno. I show that he was housed in CIM in 2012 under A as in Alpha, D as in Dog, 9204. And I'm unsure what happened to him after that. During that same episode, I mentioned that there was a Tyrone Rye who was from Canoga Parque. He had an A number, 81108, and I show was MA by at least 1967. I also show that he was president at San Quentin in 1968 when the SHU war occurred between La M and the Nuestra Familia, but I'm unsure what happened to him after that. Again, almost everything included in these videos is old news or recent news already put out in the press and researched by me as being fairly accurate. I've tracked these guys via my personal contacts or on CDC or BOP or other institutional inmate locator systems and records for over 40 years now. So I think I know a little bit about the subject, but I don't speak on any extremely sensitive intel, nor will I put out any updated charts, diagrams, newly classified material, etc. in these videos. so don't ask. I won't intentionally speak on any of these guys' current status as being active, dropout, etc., unless it is already well known or public info. I already have enough cops mad at me for putting out stuff that is 20 or more years old. I call those guys secret squirrels. They don't believe in talking much about anything with anybody, and that's why they often also don't get back much in return. Even though I retired over a year ago as a lieutenant at a major private federal detention center that housed many major gang members and drug cartel involved individuals, I still get a lot of intel, but I keep my sources confidential, whether they be active or retired, or even active or former convicts. I try to be very careful to educate people about these criminal organizations without jeopardizing any new cases, and I'm not trying to get anybody killed, especially me. And so, I know this one was kind of quick, but I wanted to finish up the R's before we move on to the S's. Once again, I appreciate your comments. Please make sure that you're respectful in doing so, and I will do the same in my response. I don't have a problem admitting I'm wrong, but it sure would be nice for some of you guys that like to point out any single little detail that might be in error, that you also give me a little bit of kudos for doing these videos. I do enjoy doing these and sharing my knowledge with others and constantly learning new things, as I hope you do. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.